Hey, what's up, guys? This is Ken.
This is Eric.
This is Dex.
This is Ken.
And this is Alter Apex Radio. Hey everybody, we are the band Alter Apex. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us. This here will actually be the first edition of a companion to our Alter Apex radio shows that we're calling Rock Chats. We've been doing the Alter Apex radio show for around a year now and introducing you guys to mostly undiscovered music. One of the absolute coolest parts of all of this has been the relationships that we formed with other creators and musicians, producers, and really artists of every kind. And so Alter Apex Radio Rock Chats is basically going to be a platform that affords us all the excuse to hang out with these new friends that we're making all over the world and have a beer together and chat about what inspires them and what they do. So come hang out with us. All right, guys, for our first episode of Rock Chats, we're very excited to have such a cool guest, a couple cool guests joining us. One of these guys, I mean, just to say that he's out of our league would probably be an immense understatement. We were super excited when he said yes to coming and hanging out with us. Rich Wilkes is a screenwriter for projects such as the classic rock and roll comedy Airheads, the movie Triple X with Vin Diesel, The Dirt biopic on Motley Crue, and much more. Also, having written and starred in a documentary set on the Vans Warped Tour depicting the journey of his own mariachi punk band, Carne Asada. So Rich and the drummer from Carne Asada, Sean, are here with us. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out.
Hey, thank you guys for having us. We love the Alter Apex Radio.
Thanks, man.
So Rich, if you would be up for it, it'd be awesome for us just to hear like just a little overview of, how was it that you realized that, movie making and bridging that with music was a passion that you were going to pursue in your life, and what path did you take to get to do all of these rad things that you've done?
Do you want me to take my shirt off for this part?
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
All the other podcasts make me do that, but this is the first one with video. I started out doing band interviews for zines back in the late 80s. And that was just, my opportunity to get to meet Jello Biafra and the Circle Jerks and Dead Milkmen and whoever, and get access to be able to ask them questions about the albums I loved. And for whatever reason, I've always been a big music fan. Always used to go to shows, then not so much anymore. And that led me into movie projects, which were music oriented. I always wanted to be a screenwriter. And as it happens, you write to your strengths. I knew, I knew a lot about music fandom and being in bands, from being in, a dozen shitty bands through the course of my life. So I've sort of parlayed that into a writing career. So the movies you mentioned, Airheads is a rock and roll comedy. Triple X is sort of the Limp Bizkit version of James Bond. That's the hero.
Nice.
And then The Dirt, based on the Motley book, they were my go-to band in high school. So that was a natural fit for me as well. And one way or another, everything sort of comes back to music, and being able to use the movies to get even further into contact with the people I admire, like Joey Ramone and Rob Zombie and the guys from Motley Crue, going to Tommy Lee's house and that sort of thing. That's the icing on the cake. It's so amazing.
That's killer.
That's cool, man. I want to tie it back real quick to one of your other projects, Glory Days, which is honestly one of my personal favorites from a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
And I think I picked up on some of this through some of your posts, like your love of music and the type of music that you're into. But I was telling Ken earlier, some of the stuff that stood out to me in that film, late 90s when I first saw it, was, the use of punk bands, right? There's mention of NoFX, there's Screeching Weasel. Ben Affleck has the Too Drunk to Fuck button. So, I stumbled across it because I got like a Nitro Records video compilation that had the Vandals, and It's a Fact video was on there. So I was like, wait, there's a movie to this. So I went out and I found it. But is that kind of where you transition into your tide with like Warped Tour, doing like punk, or is that something that like, some of the bands that you were in, were they punk bands? Were they rock bands?
Well, the whole thing with Glory Days, which is a small independent movie from 1995 that I wrote and directed about graduation weekend at UC Santa Cruz, that was Ben Affleck's first starring role, and it's got Sam Rockwell and all these great people. Anyway, because no one's ever heard of it, I gotta give you that. The score for the movie, I wanted Fat Mike to do it. I asked Fat Mike, and he was one of the guys that I had interviewed for a zine in like 91. So I got in touch with him, and he said he wanted to do it, but then when he realized that you actually have to watch the movie and sync up your composing to what's happening on screen and the cuts, he was like, "There's no way I can do that. You should call Warren Fitzgerald from the Vandals." And Warren had been learning from Danny Elfman, and so he was into it. So he did the score for us, and of course Joe Escalante, his bandmate, has Kung Fu Records. And he got me access to every band that we have on there. We had Sublime did a Bad Religion cover for the soundtrack. We had all kinds of Lookout Records bands, Mr. T Experience and Tilt. So basically I was just rating all of my favorite music. Fat Mike would give me licensing for $1. And if you call up another band and say, "Hey, Fat Mike is in for $1, then everybody's in for $1. So we got this incredible soundtrack for literally nothing. And that's what led me, to being a friend with Joe and the Vandals for a very long time. So that after Triple X, I had the idea to go and meet with Kevin Lyman and pitch him this idea of me taking my bar band on the tour. The excuse I used was I was writing an article for Rolling Stone magazine about the Warped Tour, and I wanted to do it from the perspective of a band on the road. And he bought it. He said yes. I don't know anybody at Rolling Stone, never worked with them. But I called them up and I talked to Kurt Loder somehow, and I pitched him the idea, and he said no thanks. But by then it was too late. I was already booked on the tour. So the sad part was that my bar band broke up 2 months before the tour started. So I gave up on the idea of going. And then 2 weeks before the tour started, I decided, this was too good an opportunity. So I sent out emails to everybody I knew who had been in a band.
So Sean, were you in the band?
Yeah, I was the drummer.
But were you in the bar band as well that broke up?
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah, okay. I had been in a band with Sean in the mid 90s. We just sort of messed around and never actually played out, but would jam. And he'd been in Rhythm Collision and some really great bands, and had been on tour in Europe and everything. So nice. He's one of the guys that I hit up right away when I was putting together this band for the Warped Tour.
Killer. Oh. So speaking of Warped Tour, we're talking about that. I would love for Sean to weigh in on this too. I mean, I watched the documentary. It was a little while back. I really, really enjoyed it. My wife and I stayed up after the kids were in bed, and we loved it. I would like to ask you guys if there's anything that comes to mind if we think about that summer that you guys were on Warped. Were there any crazy things that happened, people you met, surprises that didn't make it into the movie? What are some of the things that come to mind?
Sean, you got anything?
Oh man. I kind of remember hanging out with El Jefe from NoFX. Like, he hung out with us for a little while. That was actually cool. And then Rich, you may have to chime in on this, but there was a situation where somebody didn't like our presence on the tour and decided to try to sabotage our bus.
Oh, shit.
I don't remember where that was. It ended up being like Activision or PlayStation tools. But we managed to figure it out and got to whatever the next city was. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
What about did you play in the poker tournament with Bad Religion and all those guys? in
No.
Cleveland?
No,
Yeah, that was our big thing. We were planning on doing, there was going to be a drum off right after we left the tour that Sean would have been amazing on. And then they had the poker game, which we were too tired to go to, I think, after touring for 2 weeks. So we wimped out on that. But there was other, smaller encounters with people like Lars Fredriksson, who we would bump into back, you're just wandering around backstage and bump into these people that you admire, like Greg Hetson or whoever, and have like a cool little moment with them as an equal because you're all on the tour.
That's awesome.
And because we had a fancy tour bus, we got parked right with all of the big boys. We weren't stuck with all of the beginning baby bands, even though we were a fake baby band.
Yeah.
The
one of
one
the
question I want to ask real quick is, okay, so you sold yourself on being like, from Rolling Stone magazine to Kevin Lyman, and I watched the documentary today and I loved it. And I saw you interviewing, the guy from Buck Cherry and like, the guys from Avenged Sevenfold and all that other stuff. Have you heard anything back from them when they found out that you were not from Rolling Stone and this documentary came out?
You know what? By the time the documentary came out, or actually by the time of the tour, Kevin Lyman had forgot all about us and whatever story.
Right.
Because there's 80 to 90 bands playing every day on 10 different stages. So he can't keep track of anything. We were on the Kevin Says stage, which is just personal favors that Kevin is doing for people. He forgot all about it, but he once it was done, we sent it to him, and he loved it. And he actually showed it. They had a sort of a drive-in movie night on a day off of the tour, and he played it there for everybody on the tour. So fortunately, he didn't really care, and he gave us all the warped footage that we could ask for, to pad out our movie. And we just took it from some documentaries they had made. So he sort of became a partner on it with us, which was awesome.
That is awesome.
That's sweet. One of the things that I hear in both of you guys as you're talking about these things is that I find really cool, that I can really resonate with, like from our perspective as Alter Apex, is that in all of this, it's kind of motivated by fandom of music and of the people that you look up to. And it's also, that's what you use to guide your trajectory. Like you were saying, Rich, like, you kind of like were able to use some of these talents that you had and this passion that you had to have an excuse to meet a lot of the people that you wanted to meet in life, that you wanted to connect with. And then you've been able to do all these cool things with them. It makes me think about the fact that Alter Apex, so we're a band that's just about a year old, and we started kind of by accident because of a moment of inspiration that was akin back to like, the stuff we were listening to in like middle school, like the grunge rock era.
Yeah.
And so to put a different spin on our conversation and throw that at you guys, if we take a look at that musical era, that legendary time in the music scene, when you guys think about the grunge era and think about the experience that you had hearing some of those bands for the first time, what are the things that come to mind? Do you want to go first, Sean?
Well, I mean, just, with grunge sort of coming out of the 80s, for me, it was insanely refreshing, even though I was like into a lot of skate punk in the 80s myself. And I was living in California, obviously, and I was working for Ian Copeland from the Copeland family. Brother Stewart was a police and Miles had IRS Records. I was kind of getting into the whole routing bands thing. And that's where I started to hear all the music, because all of a sudden you're getting all these records in from all these different labels, and you're throwing in Mudhoney and Seaweed and of course, Nirvana came in, and I was just like, holy shit, what is this? This is insane. It's like, it's heavy, it's great, it's different, it's energy. Yeah. And it was just a refreshing sound for me.
That would have been funny if you just said, I hated it. Would have been a short answer. That's really cool.
I'm the same age as Kurt Cobain, except I made it longer than him. his stuff to me always sounded more like heavy metal. It sounded like a combo of Black Sabbath and some of the sludgier sounding metal combined with a punk aesthetic. The other bands, your STPs and your Spoon Man and I can't even remember the names now. Those ones,
Soundgarden,
Soundgarden and
Pearl Jam,
the ones that everyone is dead in,
Alice in Chains,
There you go. Those were not my jam so much. I was still more in the Epitaph Records world where NoFX was, but Nirvana was one of them that rode the cusp between the two. The other ones were too heavy metal for me at the time when I was no longer into heavy metal. They didn't sound like, my Motley Crue or Van Halen.
I'm kind of with you a little bit on that, even though I think I was a little younger at the time. I get kind of jealous when people talk about these glorious moments when they first heard Nirvana, because I felt like I knew that it was good, but I didn't want it to be taking all the attention away from the hair metal bands that I actually loved. I mean, they were coming on and they were stealing the show, and I was still like, I want to listen to Queensryche and Motley Crue and Slaughter and stuff like that. And all the kids at school were like, that stuff's lame, man. You got to listen to Nirvana,
So Ken mentioned, middle school, and I think I might be like in between you guys as far as age goes, because, for them, grunge broke in middle school. For me, it broke in high school. But around that time, that's really when I was into stuff like, I was already into like Pennywise and Bad Religion and Operation Ivy and all that kind of stuff. But, I think that, the influence, I think, was pretty apparent. I think because, Bad Religion had Eddie Vedder on a song. I mean, there was a definite tie between the grunge scene and the punk scene. Right. It was just kind of like, natural evolution. And then they brought a lot of it along into the mainstream too.
You mentioned Operation Ivy. They were my absolute favorite band for 1989, 1990. I would listen to that album every day on my drive to work. And I actually had the chance. I was in a band with Jesse, the singer's brother. Ethan Michaels was guitar player in this band I was in. And he invited me to come see his little brother's band, Operation Ivy. And he was still in high school, his little brother. Wow. And I'm like, I really don't want to go see your little brother's band. I'm sure they're great. But apparently they were really good. And he said, well, this is going to be their final show. They're breaking up. And I went, all right, that sounds interesting. But then I found out who was going to be in the car driving up to Berkeley to go see it. And I was like, I'm a little over those people. So I bailed out on going to see the final Operation Ivy show.
Wow.
And I never did wind up seeing him.
That sucks, man. That sucks.
Yeah. The legendary one that got away. Hey, Sean, who were you touring with when you were in Europe in the mid-90s?
Well, our first tour, we basically just kind of headlined ourselves and kind of just did it all on our own. We just had different promoters in different countries, but we met a band from France called the Burning Heads, who were really, really good. And I love those guys. They were super great to hang out with. And the second tour we went out to Europe, we sort of co-headlined with them for a while. And just kind of, they would play in certain, like France, of course, they played. I think in Belgium, they played headlined, and we did Holland and Spain and Italy. And it was just a blast. Those guys could not have been cooler. And they could shred on stage. And I think they're still playing too. They're still around.
Hey, tell that story about how you guys did a cover of Teen Spirit in Slovakia.
Oh, yeah. That was great. We sort of ran out of songs. Like we played about 20 songs, and these kids would not let us get off the stage. So Harlan, our guitar player, basically just like, oh, I can play Smells Like Teen Spirit. It's easy. So we just went and did it. And the place went completely ape shit. And
oh man,
I had kids like surrounding my drum kit, literally punching the cymbals, on all the down, and their knuckles were getting all bloody, and there's blood splattering all over me, and they're just having the greatest time, and I'm having the greatest time of my life. I'm like, that was probably the coolest cover I ever played. just from the genuine reaction from, these Slovenians. You got to remember, Bosnian War was not that far away from where we were playing. Like there was tanks rolling down the street in some situations, and they were just releasing energy, and it was awesome.
But it was also, wasn't it the home country of Novoselic?
Yeah, I think, yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's why they flipped out, because it was Chris Novoselic's home country. And so when they played Nirvana, they lost their minds.
Yeah.
By the way, Sean, you got your camera in a position, makes you look like a mountain.
I know.
Wasn't that bad, man. I wasn't going to give him any shit for it. I would love to ask you guys, so when you guys had to scramble because your bar band had broken up, when you guys had to scramble to put together a band, what made you choose to do a mariachi punk band? Is that because you genuinely enjoy mariachi music?
I grew up in Oceanside, down North County, San Diego. And we were always big on, going down to Mexico. And any, bar you go along Avenue Revolucion, you're going to hear mariachi music. So I had a fondness for it. I don't know anything about it except for the standards that they would play. And we realized with 90 bands on the tour, we needed some kind of gimmick to stand out. And I was reasonably sure nobody was doing punk rock mariachi. This was before El Mariachi Bronx, or the Bronx band.
Yeah.
So just taking that sort of persona and doing, the band is called Carne Asada, and our album is Full Contact Mariachi. It's on Apple and Spotify and whatever. And the documentary we've been talking about is called Punk Like Me, and it's on Amazon. So it really was an attempt to create a gimmick that would make us stand out. So we have a shirt that looks like the Ramones logo, but it's the Mexican flag, and it says Carne Asada over the top. And we would do punk versions of songs like La Cucaracha and Guadalajara and that sort of thing. And we found no matter where we went in the Midwest, there was a Hispanic contingent that just flipped out that we were playing this stuff.
That's badass.
And they were just so happy. And I had no idea there was such, in the Midwest, you go to Cleveland or you go to Kansas City or whatever, that there'd be a bunch of Hispanic kids flipping out.
I definitely found it interesting because you guys threw some legit mariachi stuff in there too, like Cielito Lindo and a lot of stuff that I heard growing up because my dad played mariachi guitar.
Cool.
But you also had some originals too, right? You had We're Not a Real Band. There was one that kind of reminded me slightly of Guttermouth because it had the Donkey Show, right? Because they had a song about the Donkey Show as well. And then there was another one in there that kind of had a nod to Ramones.
Yeah.
So hearing some of those influences kind of weaved in, but you guys, where did you guys record this? I wanted to ask that question. And also if you guys, I know you played shows outside of Warped Tour because I've seen some footage of that as well at some point. Was it more than one or I know that's a couple questions in one, but
Well, just to work backwards, we only played one other show, and that was a record release party at the Whiskey.
Nice.
The mariachi, the authentic part of the mariachi came from Luis Lopez, who's in the band, who's from Tijuana, and who, I mentioned in the documentary, he literally had to sneak across the border every day to go to high school in San Diego.
Yeah.
And then he went to USC Film School, and he's a big deal editor of documentary films. There was a follow-up to, the reasons the songs are so different is because we had, again, we wanted to sound different. So we sort of imitated one of each of our favorite bands. So there's sort of a rap rock thing on Gringos. There's a Vandals vibe on Geezer Crew. There's definitely no effects in there. We jammed in as much of that stuff as we could for variety's sake. And Sean, you remember the place we recorded? That was a pretty legendary place.
Was legendary. It was called West Beach, and early Epitaph bands and Lookouts. And if I remember correctly, I had recorded with my band Rhythm Collisionaire on a couple of 7-inches, and Donnell Cameron, who was the guy that owned West Beach, he told me a story, and I don't know if this is true or not, but when he bought it, he told me a story of bands that were there beforehand. Like the Doors did LA Woman there, and Pink Floyd had some stuff there. And then he was saying that he had tracked 2-inch tape that was just left over there that had some of the most amazing, never heard before Jim Morrison and shit like that. And I'm like, well, dude, like, can we hear it? He's like, no, I put it away. It's in climate controlled storage, like, you know, and I've never heard any then, so he could have been fucking with me for all I know. But
yeah, it's always the worst when somebody tells you a story like that. Like, I got that stuff. And you're like, can we hear it? No. They know you're going to ask. They know you're going to ask to hear it, man. Who wouldn't, right?
Hey, I wanted to ask you guys about songwriting. Do you guys do your music together? How does it work for the actual writing of the instrumental part?
Well, this whole thing started during COVID, during like when our estate was completely locked down, like, and so, and we've kind of continued the same process just because it worked. I mean, like, we're all like very, very busy guys, and it's a little easier. But I end up coming up with like a basic structure for a tune and write like a demo and record it, like drums, you know, guitar, everything, like my version, which is not near as cool as it sounds when all these guys put their stuff on it. But I'll record my version of an intro, verse, chorus, and shoot it to them. And once they all say, yeah, this is a good song, let's try and finish it, I'll shoot them my version of like a whole structure. And then we just take off pieces. Like I send Ken a version without drums and he puts drums on it. I send, you know, Eric a version without bass and he puts bass on it. Dex does a guitar solo. And then we send all the tracks to somebody who really knows what they're doing to mix it.
So we've done everything virtually to this point. Ken lives in Santa Fe, which is about 50 miles north of Albuquerque, but we actually tracked, finished 4 songs and put our first EP out before we ever even had a rehearsal together.
That was really reminiscent of what you said too, Rich, because you said that you guys wanted to do a mix of songs that sounded like some of your favorite bands. And that first 4 EP, those 4 songs are basically Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and STP. Like those are like, because we knew we wanted to do grunge. I mean, we have a lot of different bands that we love in different genres, but we're doing the grunge thing. And yeah, we just did our best to rip those bands off.
So, Ken, number 2, I wanted to ask you about how you record your drums. Can you just explain how you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Ken was saying, he'll send me a track with no drums, and then I have a Roland kit actually right there. So I'll plug in my my MacBook Pro, and I kind of just, it's all MIDI, it's all electronic. So we do that through GarageBand and Logic, and then it's kind of easier that way, just because it's digital and we're not doing it together in the same room. So that way it can all go on the same file, and then like Ken said, we send it off when it's all sounding nice and good to someone who knows what they're doing and make it sound really, really good.
So we met this guy out in the UK. We met through this band as we started doing these like Alter Apex radio things. One of the guys that we met is a dude out in the UK named Joe Marsh. And he's a really, really talented mix engineer, man. Like, he's made our last couple songs sound freaking huge. Just sending him the tracks like that. Like, it's crazy what you can do these days.
Yeah.
So the drums are all digital?
They are, yeah.
That's crazy. I had one of those digital kits like 20 years ago, and they never sounded, they didn't have the real drum sound. It always sounded can.
Yeah. Even so, if you just plug this in and just play it, with the headphones, it does sound artificial and very kind of robotic-y sometimes. But with the tracks that we're able to add in Logic and all the stuff that Joe does, it really, we were all surprised. We're like, gee, that sounds like real drums.
Yeah, that's because of the sampling libraries these days. Like, they're way more effective. Like, and the way that they can trigger the samples, like with meticulous precision.
Right.
So most of the stuff that we hear nowadays on rock records are, even if they recorded an acoustic drum kit, they're triggering other sounds in the computer. They're replacing with samples like all the individual hits. Like,
wow. Yeah, I had no idea. It's just such a full drum sound. I really enjoyed it, and I couldn't imagine that it's all electronic. Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are the other sneaky tricks that you guys use? I mean, is it a real bass, or are you using a keyboard?
Eric can't even play the bass. He doesn't even know how.
It's off the show. No, so it's real bass, but I actually record into my iPad. I have an interface that's just plugged into my iPad. I use GarageBand to capture a dry signal, and then and I think the majority of everything we send Joe's dry, right? He just puts effects on it. He just makes everything sound good. So it's it's pretty stripped down to be almost nothing. And it's pretty amazing because honestly, so I did I have a punk band too that I've been playing in for a while. And we put out a record this year, and we spent a lot of money on studio time and getting this thing mixed and finally put out. And honestly, I like the way my bass sounds better through these files than through I used an Ampeg SVT stack. And I think the digital stuff just sounds better to me. It's amazing.
Crazy. So you guys can record this entire album without bothering the neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
So Dexter, you're a guitar?
Yes.
And what about recording the guitar? Is that the same thing? Plugged directly into some kind of recording?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I've got a MacBook Pro. I've got an interface. I just put on a pair of headphones so I don't bother the neighbors or anything, and just plug in my guitar and just listen to some Dokken records or something, and get some inspiration that way, and just lay something down.
Sean, have you ever played those kind of drums?
Not really the drums part, but it's funny enough. Like I was out of work for a couple of years when I was still in LA. I'm in New Orleans now. But I had GarageBand on my computer back then, and I just bought the cord that went directly from a guitar into the side of the computer, so it was essentially like a DI. And I just played as simple as I played, and I manipulated it on there, and I kind of took like the four beats drums thing and looped it, and then found a drum fill and then put it in. So it was very computer based. But it wasn't as good as it is now with Logic and anything. But, I just got high all the time and wrote songs based on Mitch. So,
Sean has a funny story. He used to work, he said, with Ian Copeland. And one time Sean was playing a gig at the Whiskey, and he borrowed Stuart Copeland's drum set, Stuart Copeland from the Police. And he played the gig with this, legendary drum set, and then got caught up drinking and fucking around in the Whiskey, and didn't pay attention. And when they struck his band, they put Stuart Copeland's drum set out on the sidewalk on Sunset Boulevard.
Oh my gosh!
And they didn't tell me. It was actually the Roxy, and it was my first gig there. And this jackass stage manager decides not to tell us that all your equipment goes outside. And this wasn't a Stuart Copeland Tama that we all see, and then it was CB700 that he had when they were younger, when Ian and Miles and Stuart were all just messing around as kids. And I flipped the fuck out. Like I was ready to kill this guy, and he was ready to kill me for me being a complete idiot, somehow not knowing. So yeah, and I don't know what would have I probably would have been buried under a pyramid in Egypt if I lost that kit.
Wow. Yeah, because I've played at the Roxy before, and I've played at the Whiskey. Like, did they put it out like outside, like the front doors of the Roxy, or did they put it in
No.
like that back alley?
Well, it was in between. It was like a side door. It was like right side parking lot, I guess, next to the Rainbow.
Okay,
And-
right.
But there's just people mulling all over the place, and I'm upstairs getting hammered. And the next thing you know, it's like, dude, your kid's outside. I'm like, what?
I totally thought that story was going to end with it being stolen. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, because like that's amazing that it did not get stolen.
Well, it's because we're used to that in Albuquerque.
Albuquerque,
right?
man. Like in Albuquerque, it'd be like within like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, it's gone, dude. Like,
It was in the best shape in the world, you know, because it was very old. It was just something I
Yeah.
borrowed from Ian at the time, and I think because it was in the condition it was in, nobody wanted it, thankfully.
Yeah, I just saw it in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland.
wow.
Wow.
That's awesome.
It's so cool.
Yeah, that's a lie, but
Well, do you guys have any projects that you are working on that are coming up that you'd want to tell people about?
go ahead, Sean.
I mean, unfortunately, nothing music based. I'm working in the film industry now, and I'm producing, developing projects, and my partner's got a studio here in New Orleans, so that's where all my focus has been. And it's kind of a shame because I ended up running into a lot of old LA rockers that have places down here. And I was always wanting to just start jam or even just start a little band with them, but everybody's doing everything and doing. So I was hoping for the best and be able to jam with like Shauna from White Zombie or Dave Catching from Queens of the Stone Age and Eagles of Death Metal, because they're both my friends, and I just love to be able to do a power trio with those two. It'd be just nuts.
Oh,
But,
Yeah.
never did anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'm not doing any music. I started doing stand-up comedy.
Hell yeah.
Started a year before pandemic.
Is that a lie?
No, this is true.
Okay.
I was at an open mic last night. That's all I get to do is open mics for 11:30 at night on a Tuesday, and it's awful. The stuff I do is amateur hour at best, but it takes me out of my comfort zone, and I find that exciting.
That's
Otherwise,
awesome,
I'm a movie writer, so I've been just writing screenplays for the last 30 years, most of which don't get made. So there's the last one that did was that Motley Crue one in 2019.
Yeah, that was so good too. I loved it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, loved it.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
actually at my studio down in
right.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Sean runs the sound stages down in New Orleans, and I went down there for the filming, and it just by coincidence was his place, so I got to hang out with him, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to ask you guys about I guess this is the songwriting process, because one of the things that I did when we needed music for Carne Asada, since I don't play any instruments except for drums, I would like in one instance on a song we have called Gringos, I took the melody from a NoFX song called Hobophobic, and I did a little me singing demo, and I gave it to the guitar player and didn't tell him what the melody was that I had, or the song that I'd stolen it from, and he came up with his own guitar parts so that it sounded different from the NoFX one. Is that a legit way of writing a song?
I think that's badass, man. I think that's like very, very, it's funny. You reminded me of something I was doing just this morning. I was driving to work this morning, listening to that new book by Dave Grohl. I don't know if you guys have, it's fantastic. He reads it on Audible. I would definitely recommend checking it out. But in one of the parts of the book, he was talking about John Bonham, of Led Zeppelin being a huge drum influence. And then it just popped into my head. I was like, you know what? There is probably some isolated drum tracks of Bonham on YouTube. So I just threw them on while I was driving to work, listening to just drum tracks of John Bonham. And it felt so fucking cool to hear that isolated. But then I started writing some guitar stuff to it. And I'm not super, super familiar with all of Led Zeppelin's catalog. So I was writing completely different stuff. to John Bonham's rhythms. And I was like, this could be a way to do some songs, like for sure.
The song that I'm talking about, where I took Homophobic, I also put in the bass line from the Barney Miller TV show, the Barney Miller theme song. So that bass intro is the bass track that not that the actual bass track, but Joey came up with his own version, so we didn't get sued, of the Barney Miller theme, which for guys Sean and my age is so iconic. I don't know if you guys would recognize it, but it's if you saw the movie The Wrecking Crew, the bass player on there recorded that, and it's part of the movie. Yeah, it's incredible. It's so iconic.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really cool way to go about it. Just kind of, I mean, sometimes something I'll do, sometimes by accident, rarely on purpose, just because I'm kind of lazy. But I like to throw, like if I throw on something that's relatively new to me, like a new song from some band I've never heard, and listen to like maybe 30 seconds of the song, and then stop it and write the rest in your head. Like, then you're probably going somewhere different. Like, you know, if you went the same place that they went, then you'd be psychic.
Right. Like, I think one of the reasons why I got into music at such a young age, like I'm coming up on playing guitar for almost 30 years now, but it's there is no rules. There was no rules. There was nothing that's saying that, well, no, you can't do that. You know, like there's no right or wrong way to write a song, unless you're getting into some copyright territory. Then someone's going to tell you that you can't do that. But
sure.
But yeah, that's an amazing way to hear like a little bit and be like, well, I'm not a musician, and you know, the guitar player comes up with his own like interpretation of it. You know, that's a really, really cool way to do it. You know, and it's like I learned a lot of music by ear. And there was times where I couldn't necessarily play the right riff the right way, but that sort of made me go outside of the box and be a little bit more creative and kind of play it my own way.
As it turns out, the process we're talking about is what I use for most of my movie screenplays. So Airheads is Dog Day Afternoon mixed with Spinal Tap. I mean, literally, it's the plot from Dog Day Afternoon, except transposed in a radio station. Wow. And it has, you know, an influence from the Ramones, who had that song "We Want the Airwaves." Right. And then we already talked about Triple X as being it's what if Fred Durst was James Bond? You know, all guy with tattoos. Because they used to in the trailer for Mission Impossible 2 or 3, they put it Limp Bizkit. So Limp Bizkit did the iconic that. Yeah. Yep. And it just didn't fit with Tom Cruise. And it's like, well, shit, man, why not just do that version? So the Dirt is probably like Goodfellas mixed with rock and roll, you know? So I guess this grabbing these random influences and jamming them together to make something new is, I mean, Tarantino, I think that's made a brilliant career.
What's happening either way, right? Whether you're doing it consciously or not. I mean, because like all that we can really like, I mean, nobody's writing anything entirely new. You know, it just like if you blend enough things together, then people forget where you're taking it from, and then they give you the credit.
And if you get too close to the original, you call it an homage.
Yeah, it's our homage to like our whole first 4 songs, you know. Yeah, you can tell where those are coming from. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to hang out with us, and we really feel like we scored just such a cool opportunity to be able to chat with you guys and do this.
Well, there's never been a person, and Sean will vouch for this, no one has ever asked us about the music and how it was written or played or anything else. So it's been awesome to talk about it.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's kind of funny you say that, because I told Ken, like, I could ask you a million questions about your movies, because I mean, what musician does not love Airheads or you know, some of the other stuff? Sean being Rhythm Collision. I mean, pretty mind blowing to be here sitting talking to you guys. But I was like, yeah, let's really try to ask questions about Carne Asada, because we really were curious. You know, it's kind of cool just to hear that, because you know, we grew up on the skate punk era and into the pop punk era. We've all played in punk bands up until what we're doing now. That's just straightforward rock, which we didn't even know we could do. I mean, this was an experiment, but you know, Warped Tour is something really near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah.
You know, we grew up in all that and went to almost all of them, you know, from the get-go. So really cool just to kind of hear what you guys had going on over there.
And your band is called Carne Asada. Fucking tacos are the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Tacos might be the one thing that's even better than punk rock. I don't know. We'll see. Right on, guys. So thanks so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate your time. We'll hit you up and tag you when this drops within the next week or two. And yeah, thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
That was
Take
awesome.
care.
Thank you.
See ya.
Take
Good
it
night.
easy.
See you later.
That was rad.
Dude, that was so
That's
cool,
cool.
man.